Hey everyone, it's Monique with Made with Accuquilt, a friendly support group, and today I wanted to share this quick video about how to add rickrack to a border. So here's my rickrack die. I'm not sure if I had ever used it. It looked awfully clean to me, but anyway. When you have the rickrack die, it actually allows you to make two different widths of rickrack. There's this one right here, which to me looks to be about, I'm going to say 3 inches. And then there's this skinny one here that makes about a 1-inch rickrack border. And the outsides, actually, if you look at them carefully, those would make great waves. If you have like the mermaid or even the nautical medley die, these would be pretty fun waves. But today we're just going to make the rickrack, and I am just going to make this skinny rickrack. And so I've already gone ahead and of course tried to see what would work best, and here is one of my results right here. And so what I did to start with, I took my chosen fabric and I attached pieces of fusible to the back, because you have to fuse this down and then stitch it down. And rather than using long strips of fusible, I actually use my leftover pieces. When I have little pieces left over, I'll throw them in my box to see if I can reuse them for another project. So these were perfect for that. I actually was able to cut them into like rectangular or square shapes and just kind of put them on there spaced apart a little bit. And that's totally fine because I need to stitch this down in the end anyway. So as long as it's tacked down in enough places that it doesn't shift when I'm stitching it, that'll be just perfect. And another thing that I did on my die, I actually marked 2 lines on here. And this is just to keep my fabric straight. If I didn't have these lines here, when I was placing my fabric on here, I might be tempted to go crooked. You know, it's going to be kind of hard to see. And so I made sure that my lines were outside of the width of my chosen fabric so that I could keep my fabric straight. And as you can see also, well, 2 things is that, first of all, this die only cuts a piece of rickrack this long, and I wanted something longer. And also the die does not have cutting blades past this point and this point. And that's with most strip dies that Accuquilt makes. They stop at a certain point, which is fine. I know that's going to be the case. So I have tried doing dies such as this by folding the strip over, because I want to make a way longer strip of rickrack than this die makes. And I have tried folding them over, and that hasn't worked in the past because the fabric gets stretched or it doesn't line up quite right, the pattern doesn't. And so this time around I decided that I was just going to shift my fabric to get my long piece that I needed. All right, so another thing that's really helpful is to grab a piece of washi tape. And washi tape is really thin paper tape. It doesn't have to be washi tape. You could use, you know, some painter's tape or just some wrapping paper tape, as long as it's not too sticky, because you don't want it to not come off. And I also wouldn't want it to get stuck in the blades and not be able to get it out. But anyway, washi tape is very low tack. And I am just going to take this and I'm going to stick it on the end of my fabric, and making sure that my fabric is lined up between my 2 marked lines. And I'm going to wrap this around to the bottom of my die. This will not affect the thickness of my fabric at all because I'm only cutting 1 thickness, and the tape is so thin it wouldn't affect it anyway. So if I wanted to, I could stick a piece of tape across here, but I think I'm just going to make sure that I hold on to this very well when I put it through my machine. All right, so I've lined up my fabric in between my 2 marked pieces, and I'm now going to lay my mat on top, and I'm going to be really careful that I'm not shifting my mat, because things get staticky, and if you're shifting your mat you might shift your fabric as well. So just make sure you lay that down, and if you pick it up again, then make sure your fabric is still in the right position. I'm going to turn on my machine, and I'm going to hold on really tight over here especially. This side is taped down, but this side is not, and I do not want my fabric to shift because there's this long tail here, and it might just shift as I move my mat and my die to my machine. So I'm going to just squeeze this really tight, and I'm going to run it through my machine. And I'm still holding on really tight over here. I don't want this to shift. very staticky. I can remove my tape now. And I might be able to reuse that, might still be sticky enough. And like I said, the blades don't go all the way to the end, so mine is still attached. I'm just going to cut that with my scissors. And then these are my leftover pieces, which would make great waves on something else. And I'm just going to cut those where my blades stopped. I'm going to be careful not to cut into my actual scallop. So these are going to go in the trash. And now I'm going to shift everything over. And I'm going to shift it all the way over so that all my fabric is on the die now, all my leftover fabric. And I'm going to match what I've already cut. So I have this scallop over here, and I'm going to match that with the blades because I want that to cut perfectly again. Now, in order to help me cut that perfectly again, I'm going to use some more washi tape. So I'm going to grab some new washi tape. I want this to be extra sticky. And I'm going to just place that right over top of the fabric and the blades, just like this, to keep it in place. And I'm going to grab another piece, just to make sure that nothing shifts as I'm cutting. And then I'm going to take my other piece and I'm going to just fasten the end down again like I did when I started this one. Roll it underneath. Okay, everything looks like it's straight. Everything looks like it's in line with the blades over here. And I'm going to lay my mat on. And this time around, I am going to start feeding it through my machine from the uncut side. Because if I started from the cut side, I would have to feed all the previously cut rickrack through first, and that might be kind of tricky. So I'm going to turn on my machine, hold my mat tight, and I'm going to run it through the machine again. See how we did. Okay, and you see how my washi tape got cut because it was over the blades, and I can just remove that. And then here's my washi tape on my fabric, which I can just remove easily. And I'll remove this piece over here, and again trim the ends because they did not get cut, because I know my blades don't go all the way to the ends. All right, so here are my leftover pieces that are going to go in the trash. And here is my perfectly cut rickrack piece. Now, in order to put this on my background fabric, I actually folded this, I think with an iron. Yeah, you can tell there was a fold there. And just to give myself some more guidelines to line these up perfectly on the background too. But I can't really give you a measurement because it kind of depends on how thick your border is, you know, or whatever you're using. So you just need to make sure that you guide yourself so that this goes on straight onto your background fabric as well. But I would now fuse this to my background fabric, and then I would stitch it down with my machine with whatever stitch I would want to use. And so yeah, that's basically it. And I'm gonna, of course, cut these down to what size I need to. And yeah, I think it adds a really cute, fun touch. And like I said, there are 2 different sizes on this die, and yeah, it was easy, right? Until next time.